Hi everybody, my name is Jeff Benyon and I'm a portrait photographer out in San Diego, California. On top of being a portrait photographer, I'm also a full-time attorney. I've had my own practice for about 8 or 9 years, and I specialize mostly in business law, employment law, as well as injury cases. And I've been getting a lot of questions lately from models and from photographers about model releases. What are they? Do you need them? What kind of language should be in them? And so I wanted to walk you through some model releases, some sample model releases that I found online, as well as some of the releases that I use, and show you some of the language, what it means, what you think it means versus what it actually means, things that you should include, things that are problems that I've run into that now I have safeguards in there to help control things like that, problems that I've seen over the last year or so working with models and model releases. So I'm going to go through those and show you what those look like.
So let's take a look at the exciting world of model releases. The first thing I wanted to point out is the law that you have to be aware of when you're taking pictures of models and posting their pictures online. This is the law from the Civil Code in California. And by the way, everything that I'm saying today is dealing with California law. So if you're in New York or New Jersey or Alabama or wherever you are, I'm not sure what the laws are in your state. I'm not a licensed attorney in those states, only in California. So what I'm saying only pertains to California law, although there might be some carryover and some overlap in the laws where you're from. So this is California Civil Code section 3344, and pretty lengthy statute here that goes in to define what you can and can't do when you're taking pictures and posting them online, or in any format for that matter. Defines what a photograph is, defines being able to identify someone from a photograph. And this is just an excerpt of the statute. If you want to look for the whole thing, you can just Google California Civil Code 3344 and read the entire thing. Spoiler alert though, it's not very riveting. Now, fortunate for us in California at least, we have the jury instructions, and the jury instructions for any area of law that you want to go into, by the way, whether it's trespass or negligence or invasion of privacy or employment actions or whatever, California has a really concise summary that breaks all of these statutes down into bullet points and explains them in layman's terms. So what I want to do is, instead of analyzing the statute of section 3344, I want to look at the jury instructions, and these are actually what gets read to the jury if someone were to sue you for posting your picture online. These are the jury instructions. So the judge would read these to the jury and say, these are the elements that the model needs to prove in order to establish his or her case against the photographer. And so these are the 5 elements that someone needs to prove against the photographer if the photographer were to post a picture without the model's consent. So this is appropriation of someone's name or likeness. So for example, you can't, like, if you're walking down the street and you see Tom Cruise, you can't just take a picture of Tom Cruise and then post it in part of some ad that you're doing for, you know, whatever jeans or purse or whatever sunglasses company or something. And you can't use it to advertise your photography business or anything like that. So, generally speaking, though, when someone is in public, you can take their picture. It's more complicated when you want to use their picture for commercial purposes or if it's on private land. So that's where these statutes come in, and these causes of action come in. So this is appropriation of likeness. So defendant, who would be the photographer, used the model's name or likeness, and likeness means their image, so a picture of them. So a photographer used the model's picture, the model didn't consent to the use, the photographer gained some commercial benefit or some other advantage by using the model's picture, the model was harmed, and the photographer's conduct caused the harm. So I want to talk about this issue of commercial use because it's come up a couple of times. So if someone is just a hobbyist photographer, right, and someone posts on their Instagram, DM me for collaborations, and on their Instagram they post pictures of models, does that mean that they are using their Instagram for commercial purposes? Does that mean that all of the pictures that they have in their Instagram feed are for commercial purposes because the photographer is using them as part of a portfolio? Answer is I don't know. That's a close call. But if you go back and look at the language, it says either for commercial purpose or other benefit for the photographer or for the defendant. So it doesn't necessarily have to be commercial use. It could be for any other benefit, like for building up your portfolio, anything like that. So if you are to take a picture of someone, you don't have their consent, you put it in your portfolio or you put it on Instagram, you could be liable under that section that we just looked at. So this is the sister section of 1804A, and these go through the elements right here. And I'm going to talk a little bit later too about what does it mean to have someone's consent to take their picture. Because let's say I go to a photo walk or I go to a workshop and I don't have the models, I don't have a signed model release, I post the picture online, and it's the model posing, looking right in my camera, smiling, and then she says she didn't consent to me taking that picture. Like, that would probably be pretty difficult for the model to establish that she didn't consent. But I'm going to get into some more tricky issues into model consent later, because just because someone's posing for you and taking a picture doesn't mean that they consent for you to use that image online. So now this is the next section that this goes into the damages, which means like what can the model sue you for, and it lists out the elements here. So humiliation, embarrassment, mental distress, including any physical symptoms, harm to reputation, and they can also recover the profits. So the difference between the gross and the net of what the photographer brings in on any pictures that they used for you. Now that gets trickier when someone gets a picture of a model, puts it into a portfolio, and then later maybe gets work based on their portfolio. So how do you figure if that is based on that profit that they got was based on your picture? So it gets super dicey. But back earlier in those 1803 and 1804A, it talks about that the model or the plaintiff has to be harmed. And so harm can include, it doesn't necessarily mean that they lost a job or they lost some money or something because of it. It could be humiliation, embarrassment, mental distress, including any physical symptoms. So that's like a really low bar. So if someone is angry that you are using their picture, that's mental distress. If someone is humiliated because you're a horrible retoucher or you took a bad angle of them and you're posting their picture, that could be humiliation or embarrassment. So it's not a very high bar for someone to establish that they've been harmed because you posted pictures without their consent. So now that you know the laws that govern why you need model releases and the laws that protect people when you don't have model releases, I want to walk through a couple of sample model releases and look at some of the language, and we'll talk about what you need to include and some problems that I've run into in the past with some language in model releases. So the first one I want to look at, this is the Getty model release. So if you just Google Getty images model release sample, you should be able to find this. This is the entire thing. It's a one-page document. And let me break this down for you paragraph by paragraph really quickly and just show you what these model releases actually mean, what the wording in it means. Now, I want to start off not with paragraph 1, but with somewhere in the middle of the document where it actually goes through some of the definitions, because I don't want to be explaining to you the first paragraph that uses these definitions without going through what some of these words mean. So you'll see this in contracts a lot, the word assigns, and what that means is that whoever you're entering into the contract with, they can assign the rights that they're getting from that contract to anybody else. So I use this language in my model releases too, because like when I have a modeling workshop or if I have a photo walk or something, I don't want to have to get a model release for every single person that comes. I can get a model release from the model in my name, and I can assign my rights for that model release to the attendees of the workshop. So assigns just means that it's with you or with anybody else that the photographer wants to assign their rights to under this contract. You'll also see consideration. Consideration is a contract term. It just means something of value. So they say means $1 here or something else. That's not true. It doesn't have to be $1. It doesn't have to be any dollar amount. It could just be a time for print portfolio. You get consideration because someone takes pictures, and it could just be like you get experience in modeling in front of a photographer. That could be consideration. Or you get some pictures back. That could be consideration, even if you don't like the pictures. So that's what that means. I'm not going to go through what content and media, model and parent mean. Those are pretty self-evident, but I did want to go through assigns and consideration. So now let's look at paragraph 1 of the Getty model release, and it says for consideration, which means the model is receiving something, like I just said. So it could be experience in modeling, it could be images, it could be money. So the model is saying that they have given the photographer and whoever the photographer chooses to assign their rights to permission to use this content in any media, which means online, in print, on billboards, anywhere that they want to use it, except for pornographic or defamatory. So you can't like take a picture of a model and then blow it up really big and post it on your Instagram and say horrible things about the model, or put like a text bubble next to them that say like, I have herpes or something like that. Like that would be horrible. Or take their picture and, do a composite that's like a pornographic image or something. So you can't do that, and you shouldn't do that anyway. But the model or the photographer can take the pictures that they take of the model and use them for any purposes, including commercial purposes, advertising, promotion, posting them on your Instagram, in your portfolio, any of that stuff. And it could be images, text, graphics, whatever. And also, this is important right here, that the image may be cropped, altered, or modified, because that includes retouched images. That includes taking an image and cropping it in a way, a 1:1 crop, even though cameras don't ever shoot in 1:1 crop, but cropping it to put it on Instagram, or cropping out someone's legs, or cropping in close on someone's face and making it a headshot. So the images, they're consenting and giving up their rights to object if the images are used in any commercial purposes, in any portfolio, the images are retouched, the images are cropped, and you've given your consent to have these images published. And this sentence right here, I agree that I have consented to publication of my ethnicity and gender as indicated below. That's just stupid. I don't have in my model releases ethnicity and gender, and I honestly have never seen that anywhere. Like, I've never seen anyone post a picture of a model and be like, this model's white and her preferred pronoun is female or something. I've never seen that, so I don't include that language. I think it's unnecessary. I understand that other ethnicities or gender may be associated with me by the photographer. This is just stupid language. I'm sorry. I don't include that in my model releases. This is the Getty model release. So the next paragraph says that I agree I have no rights to the content and all rights belong to the photographer and filmmaker. Now, this is kind of unnecessary language because as the model, you never have any rights to the pictures unless the photographer gives them to you. So this is just kind of making the model aware of what the status of the law already is. So me as a photographer, when I take a picture of a model and I post that picture of the model online, like, I own the copyright to that picture. The model can't take the picture and sell it. The model can't even take that picture and use it. Technically, the model can't even take that picture and repost it to their Instagram unless I say it's okay. But what this paragraph says is that you are aware of the fact that just because you're in the picture, you don't own the copyright, you don't own the licensing rights to it, you have no right to any compensation of it just because you're in the picture. That gives you no rights at all. So this next paragraph says, is agreed that my personal information will not be made publicly available. The model release, at least this one, has information like the model's address and phone number and stuff. And so that's just saying that by signing this, the photographer is not going to post your address and your phone number online. And then it's got a section here for the photographer to fill out their name, their signature, the date, the shoot date. Now, why would you need this information right here? The reason is going back to the consent issue. So if I say, for example, that I get a model release from a model and I tell the model, like, hey, I'm going to shoot you this Saturday, and I shoot that model that Saturday, and I put in the model release, like, this is the shoot date is Saturday in the country, region, whatever, the shoot description, if this is going to be like a ballet shoot or something, or a beach shoot, something like that. And that doesn't mean, though, because I have a model release from that model, that every picture that I ever take of that model ever, that they've consented and given up their rights. So this goes back to proving consent. So let's say, for example, that I have a model release and I shoot a model on Saturday, and then 2 weeks later I shoot her again, and I go back and go, well, I don't need another model release, I have it right here. By putting in the shoot date, it specifically lets the model know that this is the only rights that you're giving up. And it also helps the photographer prove, if they were to go back and be sued by the model and be like, no, I have a model release for signed specifically for this shoot that we did. So that's what this is about, and that's actually a pretty smart language to put in. The next section here is for the model to attach their picture of themselves. Again, this is not needed. I don't include this in mine. Contract is not binding or not binding by the presence or absence of a photograph of the person who is one of the parties of the contract. But this is where the model puts their name. For birth date, male, female, gender, you don't need to have a birth date or a gender in a contract to make it binding. It needs to be agreed to by one of the parties. And so they're just putting their name down there for informational purposes and then signing it that they agree to it. Likewise, the contract doesn't need to have their home address, their zip code, their email address, or even the date that it's signed. So you can have those things in there. They're not necessary. I don't include the city and the home address of the models in my model releases, and that's just because when I do workshops and things like that, and I have the models sign the model releases, and workshop attendees ask for copies of the model releases, I don't want to have to go through and white out the models' addresses that they give me, or their home phone numbers or cell phone numbers, because that information is not necessary to make the contract binding, and it's just I don't need it. If I need their address, I'll ask for it in a separate document, not the model release. This is another section in the Getty model release asking what your ethnicity is. Again, this is entirely stupid. Like, I've never seen a picture posted on Instagram and then, or anywhere else for that matter, and then someone says, like, this is a mixed race model, or this is a Japanese, Korean, Indian, Black, Middle Eastern, African American, Pacific Islander model. So I don't know why Getty would need this information in their model releases. I think it's stupid. I don't have it in mine. And then a witness to the model signature. Again, a contract is not binding if it doesn't have a witness signature. So contracts do not need to have a witness signature. It might be a good idea just so that you can have someone else that you can call as a witness in case there's some dispute over the authenticity of the signature, but it's not needed. I don't do it in mine, and I'll explain to you a little bit later why. So this is my model release. You can see it's a pretty simple form. It's just one page. Let me break this down for you real quick. So this is the opening paragraph. It just says, this is between me and my assigns. Again, that's whoever I want to assign the rights to. And I even say specifically that assigns includes workshop and event attendees. So when I'm having a workshop, I just get one model release from each model. I don't have to get 15 model releases for each attendee to go to the workshop. So the model hereby gives me, the photographer, the following rights. So I have the irrevocable and perpetual. That just means like they can't take it away and that the right lasts forever. The right to use any picture that I want of the model for any advertising, commercial purposes, in any matter or medium, so online or in print. This includes the right to use the model's name and likeness in connection with the advertising. So I can say, if I take a picture, I can mention the model's name, I can tag the model, I can put in the comments the model's Instagram handle or their name, and I can do composites with those images as well. So then I also say photographer can consent. My photographer has my consent to incorporate advertising promotions into the pictures. This is just making it more clear that I can use these images for commercial purposes, and that the model is not going to get any more money based on any pictures that I use. They don't have the right to collect any licensing fees or anything like that. And then acknowledge that you're 18 years of age or older. And then I have them print their name, sign it, email, date, and social media. Now, the reason why I have their social media handle on there is because when I'm distributing the model releases to to workshop attendees or other people who come to my events, just so that they have the model's social media and they don't have to hunt for that. And what I actually do is I send these out through Adobe Sign. So I prepare the document, I go into Adobe, I click the sign button, and then I put in the model's email address, and it emails a copy of the model release to them, and then it sends me an email saying that they've received the model release. It sends me an email and lets me know when they've opened it. It sends me an email and lets me know when they've signed it. And then when they've signed it, it goes up into my Adobe Cloud account, and I can pull a copy of that from whenever. And then also, if I send a model release to someone, and like 3 weeks have gone by and they haven't signed it yet, I can log in and I can press the remind button, and it will send it to them again and say like, hey, Jeff's still waiting for you to sign this. So it's a really pain-free way for them to sign things. They can also get the email immediately on their phone. They don't have to print it out, but they get it on their phone. They can sign it with their finger. They can add a signature, a cursive signature, and then just click that they adopt that as their signature. But it's a really pain-free way to do it. And then Adobe also keeps track of the trail of when they signed it, so that it went to their email and that they opened it, and it keeps track of all of that information. So if they ever say like, I never signed that, I don't know who forged my signature on that, I've got the trail that says that it went to their email and they opened it, and that they did sign it and log in and add their signature to it. So I always use Adobe Sign. It's a super pain-free way to get your document signed. So now let's look at some problems with some of the model release language. And the first one is using the model's real name. So I had a model come to me one time, and not uncommon, a lot of models use pseudonyms, stage names, fake names when they're posting online because they don't want weird internet fans hunting them down and finding their home address and calling them and harassing them. So what do you do when you sign a model release and the model release says that you're giving your right to use the name? And if you remember, I actually have that in my model releases. So one of the things that you can do if you're a model and you have a name that you use that's a fake name, you can make sure that the model release mentions specifically that they don't have the right to use your real name. They only have the right to use whatever name you designate on the picture. So I had a situation one time where a model, she did have a fake name, and the photographer got the model's real name and watermarked that over all of the images. And it just created a huge hassle. So if you're a model and you do have a fake name, make sure that you keep an eye out for language that makes it so that the photographer can use your real name in the pictures. So what about problem number 2 is posting pictures that the model doesn't like. So if I'm a photographer and I take a picture of you and you don't like the picture, but you've signed a model release, there's nothing that you can do about it. So if you're a model and you're worried about someone taking a picture that you don't like, you might want to ask to make sure that there's language in there that protects you, that the photographer can only post pictures that you've approved, or something like that, or put some language in there that lets you protect your rights to have pictures that are only pictures that are flattering of you. Okay, so this is another complicated issue, and this goes back to the consent thing. So let's say, for example, that you're at a workshop and there's a model and she's wearing a dress and the dress is kind of open or loose fitting or something like that, and she's moving or dancing, moving back and forth, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a nipple slip. It could be just like way too much exposure than you like. Or let's say, for example, a model is moving or they're like throwing their dress and you're getting some burst movement shots of like the dress flowing in the air or something like that, and there's like an upskirt picture or something like that, and the model's not comfortable with that. So what do you do? Because if you've signed a model release and you've released your rights to have pictures taken of you and have those pictures posted, you are kind of limited in what you can do. Now, the only thing that I can say is that this goes back to what you consent to, because just because you're showing up to a photo shoot and you're posing for someone doesn't mean that you consent to have overexposed, and by overexposed I mean like not Lightroom overexposed, I mean, you know, overexposed pictures, or just because a nipple falls out doesn't mean that you've consented to that. So and that's regardless of whether you've actually signed a model release. So if you have this situation, your best argument is to argue that you've consented to have your picture taken, but you haven't consented to giving up your right of privacy to have parts of your body shown that you were not expecting. So just because someone clicks a button right at the right place in the right time doesn't mean that you have consented to that type of picture taken of you. So one thing that you can do is, because I've had this situation come up before, this is language that is embedded into my website, and if you sign up for any events that I do, any workshops that I do, photo walks that I do, this is part of the terms and conditions. So this says specifically to protect the models that if in the event that there is a nipple slip or accidental overexposure or something like that, the model retains the right of privacy to not have that picture taken, unless it's specifically designated as a nude shoot or something. And I haven't done any nude workshops yet, but this just says, you know, basically, in case something falls out, in case something shows and it wasn't intended, the photographer does not have the right to publish those specific pictures. And if there's ever any question about what is appropriate or not, show it to the model first or show it to me first, and we'll let you know if that's appropriate or not. Okay, so what about issue number 4? Can the model or the hair and makeup artist repost the pictures? So if you're the photographer and you post the pictures, can the model, hair, makeup artist take that picture, repost it to their same Instagram? And the answer to that is no, unless the photographer consents. And so if the photographer sends pictures of sends pictures to the model and says, you know, thanks for showing up, here are some pictures for you to post, then they can do it. But if you are a model or a hair or makeup artist or set designer or any other part of the creative team and you see a picture that a photographer took of you and you like it, you do not have the right to take that picture and repost it. If you want to, though, and you're not clear, ask the photographer if you can do it. And sometimes the photographer might not let you do it because they're limited by other licensing agreements that they have with whoever they're taking the picture for. If it's a commercial shoot or an advertising shoot or something for another company, there might be an embargo situation. So if it's for some product that hasn't been released yet, you don't want to take the pictures and post those to your Instagram or post them wherever. So just because you were involved in the shoot and you might be in the credits somewhere doesn't mean that you have the right to post that picture. So there we go. I hope that was helpful and sheds a little bit of light on why we need model releases and some of the language that needs to be in there, as well as some of the language that doesn't need to be there. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave me a comment and comment and subscribe if you haven't already. And I look forward to putting together more of these for you. Thanks.